Welcome, everyone. We're just admitting a few more people. So bear with us and we'll get started in a second. Okay, I think we've let everyone out of the waiting room now. So welcome. My name is Kenna. I am a white woman with blue eyes and brown hair wearing a cream jumper and a green cord dress. This is the fourth event in our series of how-to events on data and evaluation. So we've been having a little theme going on there. And these events are entitled to be practical sessions to help you build skills, develop your practice, and solve issues. This series is part of the place-based peer learning program, which we co-created with representatives from Creative People and Places, local cultural education partnerships, cultural compacts, and the series was developed in response to a request for expert guidance in skill building and problem solving. So we offer other event types that create space for networking and workshops that dive deeper into topics. If you would like to connect with anyone after this event, please do so during the through our networking platform, Hivebright, which you registered for this event on. So this session, how to get started with community-led monitoring and evaluation, the what's, where's, and why's of facilitating locally owned practice, is being delivered by Dr. Elene Cloete and Nancy Bobadilla. I hope I got those names right. My apologies if I did not. From Outreach International. Outreach International has been facilitating community-led development since 1979 with the goal of sustainably addressing poverty-related issues worldwide. They work in 10 countries around the world and apply their unique approach on sustainable change on a daily basis. So this session focuses on community-led monitoring and evaluation, what it is, why it's beneficial, and how you might get started. Elene is the Senior Director of Research and Advocacy at Outreach International and has been doing this for over 15 years in community development programs with nonprofit sectors and rural socio-political contexts. Nancy brings over 25 years of experience in community-led developments to her role as a trainer and regional coordinator at Outreach Philippines, working primarily in central Luzon and Masbate Island. She also works with other partners of Outreach International. So I will hand it over to them, but first I just want to say we do have BSL interpretation and live captioning today. So we have Jim and Christy with our BSL interpretation, and Kate is behind the scenes as our live captioner. So thank you, our team. We also have Sarah supporting the chat, and my colleagues Harriet and Rebecca also offering support. There they are waving on screen. You are welcome to please, we will monitor the chat for questions, so please feel free to chat with us, and also if you'd like to come on camera later and ask questions, Elene and Nancy will invite you to do so. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome.
Great, thank you so much, Kenna. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Nancy and I are so delighted to be with you and also with your community and talking more about the work that we do. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if you all can just bear with me to get our technology going here. All right, so as you introduced us, Kenna, thank you again for this opportunity. My name is Elene. I'm the Director of Research and Advocacy. I'm a white woman with blonde hair with greenish eyes, and I'm in my mid-40s, and I'm wearing a grayish sweater.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. My name is Nancy Bobadilla. I'm a community development practitioner from Outreach Philippines. So I work for Outreach Philippines since 1998, and I'm just a tiny Filipina.
Great. And as we shared, and Kina also shared, we are from Outreach International. I'm based in Kansas City in the US, and Nancy is joining us from the Philippines, and where it's evening time. Thank you so much for joining us, Nancy. I'm so delighted to have you as my co-pilot with me. I'm going to hand it over to you, Nancy, to share a little bit more about what it is that we do in a little bit more detail.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Elene. So what is it that we do? Many people in communities we support face poverty-related challenges, like issues related to no clean water, poor sanitation, and little income. But they often suffer from these challenges in isolation, not necessarily knowing that their neighbors are facing the same challenges as they do. And they are also very much impacted by those challenges. And when they do want to address them solo by themselves, the problem become overwhelming. But when they start to come together as a broader communities and start to work together, they see results. They learn from and they reflect on such results. And they develop ownership over those results in the process. So when they are formalized into an official organizations with leaders, they become even more effective at addressing their challenges and improving the quality of life in their communities. So as you can see, it's like carrying a big water tank up some stairs, become very possible. And that is exactly what we do at Outreach International. So we organize people into a community-based organization with operational structures and policies. And these organizations need leaders. So we also cultivate grassroots leaders who can lead their organizations and communities towards improved quality of life. So we bring people together, reminding them that their collective power, their ability, and their agency. And most importantly, we remind them that they can do amazing things if they work together. So we partner with 9 nonprofits around the world to implement community-led development within majority world context. And you can learn more about our work and how we do it by clicking on these 2 QR codes. So it's Menti time, and I want to take it back to Elin.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy. Yes. So I'm going to leave 5 more seconds here if you want to just get those QR codes going on your phones and your devices. And then we're going to go over to Mentimeter. If you have used Mentimeter before, you will be very familiar with it, but I'm going to talk you through it nevertheless. On here, you will see a QR code, and this QR code is going to take you to the Mentimeter website where there's a question waiting for you. Alternatively, you can go to www.menti.com, and then it's going to ask you for a code, and the code that you will enter is 62908603. So the enter code again is 92908603. All right, so I'm going to go and escape from this screen so that we can go to our Menti screen. All right, very good. Thank you so much. And I'm seeing people are already populating our screen. That's wonderful. So the question is, if you represent an organization or a particular activity, what is the focus of your work? And we are seeing some wonderful things. Food insecurity, funders, we have visual arts festival organizers, arts and culture, supporting and advocating for over 500 community managed libraries across England and Wales. That's amazing. We're commissioning and present new music. We have dance, theater, community art, visual arts, creative and culture in our community, museums and galleries, community arts, arts and culture. Oh, it's so wonderful to see so many of you with such a wonderful portfolio of activities supporting your communities in such diverse ways. It's wonderful, breaking down barriers and accessing culture and creativity, community-led folk, We have community-led development colleagues in the Zoom room with us. Arts and culture, cultural innovation for social change. That's amazing. Social justice and environmental justice and sustainable development goal. That's wonderful to bring arts culture across the Staffordshire Moorlands, which is underrepresented and supporting communities. Wonderful to have you with us. Museum community activities. Okay, that's fantastic. Please go ahead and populate more. It's wonderful to see all of this representation here with us. I'm going to escape us now from this question, and we are going to go to back to our Canva again. All right, fantastic. So now that you have a little bit of a grasp of the work that we do, and we also have gotten to know you a little bit from the perspective of the work that you do, let's now get into the work that we have for us ahead for the next couple of minutes. The roadmap for today. In the first part of our session, we want to unpack a little bit what community-led development is from our perspective at Outreach International. And we will also talk more about the building blocks of monitoring and evaluation. We will share with you how we have operationalized monitoring evaluation within our community-led context and also our methodology. Monitoring evaluation for us have become a very natural part of our process. And because of that, we have also seen the frequent emergence of wonderful benefits that come from that. And that is what we want to share with you more about in the second part of our session. You will see in the Menti, we are already asking that kind of question, and that is what the second part of our session will be on. We have gained a lot from community-led monitoring evaluation, and we want you to gain from it as well. And that both these two parts today will set us up very nicely for May 8th, when we will be visiting with you again. And during that session, we will share a little bit more with you on how we do all of the work that we will sharing with you about today, including the quantitative and qualitative methods of project and process evaluation that we have incorporated into our work. Okay, so that's the roadmap for today. Very excited to be here. I'm going to hand it over to you, Nancy.
Yeah, thank you, Elene. So let's start with community-led development. So we know community-led development and locally led development is a common approach to development and currently implemented across different sectors and geographical areas. And organizations that implement CLD have all their own methodology and also focus. And we will share a bit more on how we as Outreach International define CLD and then also how we operationalize it. So community development from our perspective is an approach to development that prioritizes local ownership, not only when it comes to decisions made over how should be done, how, where, and by whom, but also how those decisions should be implemented and then managed. So for us at Outreach International, in addition to facilitating such ownership, we also prioritize perpetual learning. Here, we are not necessarily talking about hard skills such as building toilets or improved gardening methods, but it is about transformative learning and increased processes of internal motivation and self-regulation. So we want to cultivate among our participants an awareness of their own learning and ownership. And then alongside such ownership, we believe emerge positive changes in terms of agency, efficacy, and capacity. So the question is, how do we facilitate community-led development? So we do this through 3 sets of doing activities and 1 perpetual learning process. So first, we support communities in addressing their issues of poverty. So we have a set of activities geared towards that. Okay, and then second, we support communities in turning their issues into solutions in the form of community-based or community-managed projects. So we have also a set of activities focused on that. And third, we want to ensure that communities implement those projects, whether they are focused on water or youth development. And for that, groups need some organizational or social infrastructure. And we therefore have activities specifically geared towards that. And we call this organizational development activities. So through all of these activities, we are supporting communities in elevating their learning, becoming aware of their capacity as people, their ability, their agency, and self-efficacy. And this is a repetitive process, that includes knowing their situation, analyzing, deciding and planning, and then acting, and then evaluating, and then reflecting on the results and impact of the actions or interventions. And in each activity people participate in, we make sure that people are consciously involved, meaning they are interested and aware of the need to be involved. So for us, this 5-step of natural learning process is very important because it is not only about doing activities. We want participants also to be actively aware of what they are doing. We want them to learn from what they are doing and then take such learnings to improve their future activities. So we believe that by naturalizing and absorbing this process, people gain a deeper level of learnings and of course a greater sense of ownership over their learning and the activities that they are participating in. So for us, community-led developments means supporting communities through different sets of activities to address their poverty-related challenges or issues through activities they plan, implement, and manage themselves. So it also means supporting them in active learning by doing experiential learning. So we believe that this combination of ownership and perpetual learning can contribute to greater sustainable development. And therefore, all of our activities are structured around that cyclical process of natural learning, which in our opinion elevates not only people's experiences, but also their awareness of their challenges and abilities. So let's now look at the second part, the monitoring and evaluation. And we have Elene to talk more about that.
Excellent. Thank you, Nancy. So Nancy shared how we understand community-led development. Let me now share with you a little bit more on how we understand monitoring evaluation. Traditionally, monitoring evaluation comprises of different components, but then it also serves a real functional goal, a rationale, so to speak. The rationale of monitoring evaluation is twofold, in our opinion. Firstly, the function of it is, or the goal of it is, to gauge whether we as operators, as organizations, as funders are doing what we are saying we are doing. And that's the monitoring component, right? Monitoring whether we are doing what we are saying we are doing. And then second of all, it's also to gauge whether what we are doing is leading to positive change, whether that positive change is intended or not. And that's the evaluation component of it. But increasingly more, we see it in our organization over the past and also in other spaces and places, people are also seeing and using monitoring evaluation as a learning component. So in other words, to learn from monitoring evaluation results and findings on how to improve maybe their intervention, to use that findings to not only satisfy and to give it to funders and donors, but then also to actively use it to see where can we refine our interventions, where can we adjust it, or maybe is there a need to do it all over? Do we need to go back to the drawing board and rethink what we are doing? And that is typically also intertwined with the approach around the theory of change, developing a theory of change and testing it, refuting it, or then refining it. Now, the building blocks of monitoring evaluation, so what you see is the rationale. The building blocks of monitoring evaluation have also been integral in how we've been seeing monitoring evaluation. The first of those building blocks is the design of the monitoring evaluation itself. And that would include not only identifying who are the stakeholders interested in a monitoring evaluation, but then very importantly, it also includes the formulation process of your overarching evaluation question or your research question, choosing then the methods you would want to use or decide to use to collect the data to respond to that question, and the developing the data collection tools if need be. And then, of course, if you develop those tools, also to test them via piloting to see whether they are doing what you want them to do prior to going to the next building block and the next step, which is data collection. And then following data collection, obviously you're going to go into data analysis. And a lot of times, depending on the methodology that you choose, you would go back to data collection after doing some analysis to decide, from an iterative perspective, you need more data or you need a more refined data set, and then you will go back to data analysis, which then leads you into data synthesis, compiling all of your data and your findings and results. And then eventually all of that would then go into the dissemination process. So taking your data, your findings, your results, your recommendations, and putting that into, ultimately in our work, and I'm sure in yours too, into a report to then share back to your stakeholders. All right, what happens if we merge the ideals of community-led development with those of monitoring evaluation, and therefore also the rationale that I shared earlier of knowing whether we are doing what we are doing and knowing whether what we are doing is having the intended impact or not. Now, if you take the core objectives of community-led monitoring evaluation, as Nancy has shared earlier, and that's ownership and perpetual learning, and then you superimpose that onto the objectives and also the structure and the building blocks of monitoring evaluation, potentially you end up having two sets of questions that will guide you. You can ask the following: to what extent can we facilitate learning, agency, efficacy, and an increased sense of self in and through our monitoring evaluation processes? Additionally, you can ask, to what extent can we facilitate learning and then also local ownership through these different stages of the monitoring evaluation process? So in other words, you have the building blocks of monitoring evaluation, and then you can ask, can we use, and to what extent can these building blocks also speak to goals around ownership, goals around facilitating learning, agency, efficacy, and so on and so forth. All right, and that brings us to community-led monitoring evaluation. And I'm going to turn it back to you, Nancy, to share a little bit about how we've operationalized that.
Yeah, so that is the framework that we've been aiming to do at Outreach International. So we've been working towards processes and activities that constantly seek outcomes of ownership, learning, and transformation. And for us, that should also be the case for when we facilitate M&E activities. So how do we make sure that we can reach these outcomes of ownership, learning, and transformation? So basically, we use a very straightforward verification questions that guides us as practitioners along the way. And that is for every step in the monitoring and evaluation process. We ask, are people participating? Are all different people groups or stakeholders involved in such participation? So these two verification questions should then be front of mind for us when we go through the different building blocks of monitoring and evaluation. So for example, when it comes to monitoring and evaluation design, the questions would be, to what extent are local communities as stakeholders actively participating in the decision-making around when, where, and how the M&E activities will take place? And to what extent are all stakeholders included in deciding on the development of the evaluation or research questions? And then we ask these questions also to the remaining building blocks. So let's say for data collection, are participants brought into the reason why they are collecting data? Are participants included in decisions around who, when, and where data should be collected? And then we will ask the same questions for other remaining building blocks, for data analysis, for data synthesis, and eventual data dissemination and usage. So considering our framework of knowing and doing, as you can remember, the 5 steps of the natural learning process, we talked about earlier. So it is crucial that throughout the monitoring and evaluation activities, people should constantly evaluate and reflect on these activities. That is when the learning happens, and that is when the transformation happens. So we feel confident that when you combine verification questions around participation and inclusion, and you also facilitate ongoing evaluation and reflection on different activities of MNE, that is when you see the combination of CLD and MNE evolve into engaging and learningful experience that is so much more than just getting data for the sake of data. So, okay, so I think that is the end of part one from me. And I think, Elene, it will be another mentee from
Yes. Yes, absolutely, Nancy. It is another mentee. And I opened the question earlier for you to already populate the question around the benefits of community monitoring evaluation. If you have not done so, or you joined a little bit later, here's the QR code for you to go directly to the Mentimeter. And then also you can go to www.menti.com, and the code would be the same, 62908603. So Nancy and I will shortly share with you in part 2 of our presentation what we perceive and what we've experienced are the benefits of community-led monitoring evaluation. But we want to learn from you, if you have been involved in these kinds of activities, what do you think the benefits are? And if you have not engaged in this yet, what do you imagine the benefits of it can be? So I'm gonna, bear with me, I'm gonna escape here from this one and go back to our mentee. Okay, this looks great. It looks like we have some responses already. Oh, 22 responses already, that's great. Please go ahead and add more. Oh, beautiful, community buy-in, general responsiveness, more sustainability, a sense of place and agency, 100%. Participatory human development, participating in it. People are likely to be more honest and encouraged others to take part in the feedback. Communities and local residents make the decision about arts programs, 100%. They are in the driving seat, leading all the decision making. That's fantastic. It ensures ownership and sustainability over activities. Communities are empowered and they are heard. The lived experience is there. Equity and participation, authentic, equitable, it's fair. Do with, not to, love it. Yes. More likely to ask the questions that will explore what will make the most difference in the communities we work in. Cannot agree more. That's such a wonderful benefit. The democratization of data, 100%. Nancy, these are some great ones, right? Greater ownership and buy-in. The community define what they want to know, value, and what they want to evaluate. Yes, I'd imagine there's less chance of organizational influence. Yes, because it's the communities making collaboratively those decisions, right? Those directly involved. To ensure we are, oh, these responses are wonderful. Thank you so much. Better and more sustainable outcomes and impact. Sense of ownership by participants and improved engagement and sustainable development. These responses are wonderful. We will keep the Menti open. If you go through and you think of more benefits, please feel free to add them to that. But thank you for these, Nancy, and I appreciate them so much. And we will save them and keep them and put them in our file for future usage. All right, so let's go back to our presentation. Oh, no. Okay, very good. Okay, so then this moves us into part 2. What are the benefits? What are the benefits and what have we learned from combining both the community development principles that Nancy shared earlier, and then also what community evaluation is, what it's intended to do, and so on and so forth. Now, we have learned that the benefit of community monitoring evaluation is very much similar to what you would see in more traditional monitoring evaluation. So in other words, it can do those things. It can help you gauge whether you are doing what you are saying you are doing. And it can also help you determine whether your intervention and your activities are having the intended impact that you hoped it would do. An example that I want to share with you, and we'll tell you more, and we will go into more deeper detail with this community group, but it's a women group out of the Philippines in the island of Masbate, and the community group is a women-led group, and they are called Kasak. And in 2022, they implemented a rice loan project. And this rice loan project was intended to speak to issues around food insecurity in their community. They implemented the project, and then they were curious about the impact of this project toward food insecurity. Is it doing what they want the project to do? They then, together with the practitioners, they designed an evaluation initiative, including designing the evaluation questions around that, specifically geared to understanding food insecurity. They developed a survey with both baseline and endline data. They collected the data, they analyzed the data, and they were able to see the changes in their participating households' perceptions around food security, and they could see a decrease in that. The Likert scale findings that they had, before there was levels of 3.8, and then the inline data showed levels of 2.6. And they had that data, and because they had both inline and baseline data, they could then ask a statistician to tell them in more specific detail whether there was statistical significant difference in those two findings, and there was, with a p-factor of 0.004, which is a great significant difference. So in other words, Kasak, as a women's group, they were able, through an evaluation question that they themselves designed and curiosity that they themselves had, were able to do what traditional monitoring evaluation is intended to do. They were able to determine whether the change is there, and whether the change is there, what they wanted it to do. Okay, so that's the first thing that monitoring, that community-led monitoring evaluation can do for you. The second thing that it can do for you is it can be a learning tool. It can contribute to learning. It can provide community groups with the information they want and need to better understand the challenges within their community. So, and how they then can expand and then address those challenges. I now want to introduce you to two groups, again in the Philippines. It's also two women-led groups. They were curious about what sanitation looks like in their respective communities. And so they developed a scoping study to ask around and understand what sanitation conditions are, who has access, who does not. And then following the evaluation, we asked them to reflect a little bit on that experience, so that we can also learn from them what they were thinking about the whole process. And we brought some videos along with you. So let's hear directly from the women how they learned and what they've learned.
May mga natutunan tayo hindi lang sa ating sarili, pero higit sa ating komunidad. Sa ating paglilibot upang mangalap ng datos, nakita kong karamihan ay hirap magpatayo ng maayos na palikuran at talagang may mga kapos at di kayang magkaroon ng sariling palikuran. Sa usapin ng mapagkukunan ng malinis na tubig, karamihan ay walang sariling poso. Meron lang pong komunal na poso dito at hirap sa pag-iigib para matugunan ang sapat na pangangailangan ng malinis na tubig.
Nang dahil sa pananaliksik na ito, mas nalaman namin ang kalagayan ng aming komunidad. Marami pa pala ang pamilya at kabahayan na apektado ng problemang tungkol sa tubig, sanitasyon at kalusugan.
Great. Thank you, Donita. Okay, so in other words, CL M&E can do what M&E can do. It can help you monitor, it can help you evaluate, and it can also contribute to learning. But there's so much more, right, Nancy?
Yeah, it can have just so much more potential, because we also believe that, community-led monitoring and evaluation is also inclusive. It can be more targeted in collecting data and information that all stakeholders want and need. So in comparison to more traditional forms of monitoring and evaluation, community-led M&E intentionally includes the questions and queries of local communities. They can include questions that they are curious about. So one example is how community leaders are always curious about membership participation. So in the case of one of our partner communities in Masbate Island, leaders proactively included into their evaluation design a question linked to membership engagement. The same is true in one of our partner communities in Central Luzon, in the village of Santa Monica. The community members were curious about the interest rates of local lenders on cash loans versus rice loans. So apart from that, we also believe that it's about potential action, because it facilitates action. So after data comes planning, right? And then comes action. So we like action and planning in community-led M&E the most because it supports us and the community groups in being more effective. So in the case of another group in Masbate Island, the group recognized through their evaluation of a local water system project that they have not enough water points or water fetching stations. And that access to water remains a crucial struggle for many households. So the group collected data on access to water from different areas in their community. And from the data, they recognized that their project's water points are not necessarily equally distributed. So in some areas, more people are affected than in other areas. So the people need more water points. And then they use their data to support their advocacy effort for more resources with the local government so that they could get more materials to get more water access points for their members. And more from Elene. There are more from Elene.
Yep, definitely. Increasingly in our work, and it was so wonderful to see it also mentioned in the Mentimeter earlier, increasingly in our work, we are inspired by the notion, nothing about us without us. For far too long, we are of the opinion that implementing organizations, funders, researchers have been doing evaluation studies and also research on community members rather than with community members. And doing the latter, so in other words, working with community members just makes, in our opinion, so much more sense. Because if you think about it, it is their communities, it is their context, it is their data. So they should be included through the whole process. So for us, it makes sense. For us, it's the right thing to do. Additionally to that, and also related, community-led monitoring evaluation can be so culturally responsive. One area that we have seen that is in processes of data collection. In Santa Monica, the community that Nancy mentioned earlier, and we will tell you more, we will go really into detail introducing you to Santa Monica on May 8th, but there the community group were pushing back when we introduced them to particular and we recommended particular methods of data collection. And they were curious about the method, but they were saying, well, we want to adjust it to make it more adaptive and responsive to our community and what we want to collect and the data that we can. And so because we have been emphasizing through our interventions, local participation and also inclusion, we feel that the Santa Monica group in this case, they felt comfortable in sharing their ideas and their opinions. And so for them to then say, well, that's a nice method, but let's adjust it and make it a little bit more appropriate for our context was just a natural response for them. We'll share more on May 8th on that one. And then lastly, CLM&E, in our opinion, is transformational. And we've seen such transformation happen. It's empowering, it strengthens agency, and it most definitely strengthens self-efficacy, but then also group efficacy. It promotes learning more about the self. And at the same time, it's also a capacity strengthening tool. A lot of times we work with community participants who have never done research before, or they've never done monitoring evaluation before, and then they can strengthen that capacity that they have inside themselves. And then the awareness that comes out of that is so much more than just the results and the data that comes out of that. We will now go back to the 2 community groups that worked on sanitation, and let's hear what they are saying in this regard.
Sa pamamagitan ng pananaliksik na aming ginawa, nagkaroon ako ng bagong kaalaman, lalong-lalo na sa paggawa ng mga tanong upang makakuha ng sapat at tamang datos.
Bilang isang researcher, natutunan ko sa sarili ko na kaya ko pala ang maging isang researcher. Dati, ang alam ko sa salitang researcher ay para lang sa mga may pinag-aralan o mga profesional. Hindi pala. Kahit pala sa isang high school graduate na tulad ko ay pwedeng maging isang researcher. Kailangan lang interesadong matuto at makipag-participate sa mga tulad ng gawain ito. Alam ko, ganito rin ang nararamdaman ng aking mga kasamahan. Diba, Ate Albi?
Correct ka dyan, Lilibet.
All right, great. So the benefits that we see is, as we mentioned before, it can do what monitoring evaluation does, but then on top of that, it can increase the inclusivity, it can increase voice, it facilitates action, it's culturally responsive, it's transformational, it's the right thing to do. And by no means is this list conclusive. There are so many more other benefits out there, and we are curious to learn more about them as we continue to do this kind of work. What's next? On May 8th, we will be back, Nancy and I, and we're so happy that we can be back and for the invitation to be back. We will share a little bit more on how we do all of these things. And so we'll go into the nitty-gritty more on methods, on how we support communities in doing all of these processes. We will introduce you in more detail to the group in Santa Monica. We will introduce you in more detail to the group in Kapakula, and that's the group that worked on their water system. We will introduce you in more detail to the women in Hakmang and their issues around food insecurity. And then we'll also go to Cambodia and introduce you to one women group there in Bostatrao and the creative ways that they have used data to think through and speak to their changes. All right, that's all from us from now. We are hoping, Nancy and I, that there's some things that you could have taken and can take from what we've shared, and that there's some alignment between the work that you do and the work that we do. Our context might be different and our implementation sectors might be different, but when it comes to monitoring evaluation, I had a discussion with a friend yesterday, and he said, when it comes to numbers and data might be in detail different, but it's still data and it's still numbers. And the way that we collect them, there's a lot of overlap between different sectors. Okay, so I'll stop there. Nancy and I are very, very much looking forward to hearing your questions, your comments. I see there are comments in the text box, but in addition to that, please unmute and we will respond also to your questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Kina, I'm going to stop sharing, right? All right, good.
Sure. Here, let me just spotlight myself. I'm going to monitor the chat, and if you'd like to ask a question on screen or chat to us, please do raise your hand. We have a question in the chat already from John. Do you have a rough suggestion of what percentage of project resource should go to monitoring and evaluation?
Monitoring and evaluation or community-led monitoring and evaluation, John? Or just monitoring evaluation in general?
I guess, yeah, in general. So if it's a funded project, sort of what proportion of the resource would you typically put towards that?
And what proportion of funding?
Well, or equivalent staff time, just
Staff time.
A sort of suggestion of what level
Yes.
of overall you would put towards monitoring evaluation.
Got it. Okay, that's a great question, John. So in our process, because monitoring evaluation is so built into what we do, our practitioners, Nancy and I'm just jumping in, and please jump into, right? Our practitioners incorporate monitoring evaluation into their activities the whole time. So to give you a little bit more context, we don't necessarily have monitoring and evaluation professionals on our teams because our practitioners incorporate that into their interventions. So I would say if you were to put a percentage on that, Nancy, it could be anything from 30 to 35% of their time would go toward monitoring and evaluation because it's just so valuable. And I think even, so that's at the practitioner level, John. At Outreach International, more on a higher level, with us supporting programs and also funding, we put at least the same amount of time toward monitoring evaluation, toward research, to understanding, you know, to what extent the work is working and what we can learn from it. And then also, you know, to support communities, what they can learn from it and in what way it can be transformational. Nancy, anything else as far as the time is concerned, the time component and the funding?
Yeah. If we're talking about the community-led monitoring and evaluation, I mean the community-led M&E activities that the field practitioners facilitate with the community members, because it is true that we usually do not because you know when we facilitate, for example, proposal making or project proposal making for a specific project, we do not actually facilitate putting a specific amount or budget for monitoring and evaluation because that is part of the project development activities or project management activities of the people. But recently, we are also talking about putting a certain percentage of budget from the project proposal because they also consume not only time, Elene, but also John, but also money. They spend money when they need to like go to the city to get like data about construction materials, you know, data about the different components of the project. So they also need funds for transportation, so something like that. So a little amount of budget that we think are also, you know, manageable to be included in the project proposal of the community.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great question. I just want to add to that, John, too. Even our process of budgeting is participatory and collaborative. So we would engage and our community members would say, well, this is the amount of money, to Nancy's point, we would need to do the data collection, right? And then they would incorporate that into their budgets too. Yeah, it's a lovely question. Thank you, John.
So we have a comment from Hannah that we often start projects at the end by setting monitoring evaluation based on funder impact requirements, which determine our aims, objectives, audience, and activities.
Yeah, yeah. Hannah, and by that you mean you do the monitoring evaluation at the end and you do planning around that toward the end instead of doing it at the beginning?
Hi all.
Hi.
We start with our funders' impact. So at the beginning of any project, we start by actually looking at our funders' impact reports and saying, right, what will they need? And then that helps us to set any questions we might be having, how much input community members need and how useful that would be. So actually looking at the end determines the rest of it for us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, a lot of times there's no way around that too, right, Hannah? Because your funder is also a stakeholder and they are also curious. And so we would incorporate, and our community partners would also incorporate those criteria and those funding requirements into their processes of monitoring evaluation, but then also theirs. You know, what is it that they want to learn? What are their objectives and what are their intended outcomes? So, yeah.
Thank you. Question from Rebecca. You mentioned dissemination and maybe final reports. To what extent are the community involved in those?
Yeah, that's a lovely question. We are working on that, Rebecca, because the more we can get them involved in creating that they are doing it already, but the more we can get them involved, the happier we get. Nancy, you have a very recent experience of that report making, right?
Yeah, it's really amazing, you know, when you facilitate you know, after data collection, because we also facilitate collection of data using an online or digital application. So usually Kobo Toolbox, if you're familiar with Kobo Toolbox. So we train community leaders in using Kobo Toolbox, because the good thing about Kobo Toolbox, aside from it is a free application, right? MLP data collection application. It can it pre-populates report. You know, immediately people can see the result. So the good thing about that is that people can immediately extract or export or download the data, and then and export it into Excel, and then they can easily insert like graphs about graphs to make the report more visuals. So, and then those report, including those visuals that they included in their Word document, and so it so all those steps of data extraction up to development of project report using those visuals and reports straight from the Kobo Toolbox report, they do that, and they use that in submission of their project report to the funder.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. That's really interesting. We have another question for Rebecca. Are all your community participants volunteers?
Yes, all our Nancy, I'm going just straight for it again. All our community participants are those intended recipients, for lack of a better word, of our intervention. So our project participants, so I'm going to give you a very concrete example. When we go into a community and start working into a community, we start forming community groups, and those groups can be anything ranging from 40 to 150 people. And those are our participants. And then out of those participants then would be those who are directly involved in the community-led monitoring evaluation components. And those are mostly the naturally emerging leaders in that group. And just because you can't have 150 people do monitoring evaluation, right? It's just not a good, effective use of time. The leaders that emerge, they are the ones that mostly take the lead, and they 100% do it on a voluntary basis. Unless, and we haven't truly thought through this yet, if they were to, for example, incorporate maybe a stipend into, submitting a funding to an external funding request to an external funder, they might maybe write in a stipend for themselves, because it takes time away from their livelihoods to collect data to do this work. They are very, very much open to do that. But Nancy, at this point, it's been mostly voluntary, right?
Yeah, 100% volunteer.
Yeah, we have some really committed leaders. Yeah.
Lovely. Question from Seema: would you say your whole projects are co-produced?
Nancy?
What do you mean co-produced?
Co-produced? Yes, so I'll just quickly go. Seema, co-produced, I also think as co-created, right? So co-created initiative, and all of our projects, all of our interventions are 100% that. When we move into a community, we learn from them. What are your issues? what is it that you want to address? What is it that you envision is essential to a more thriving community for you? And then they come up with those list of those issues. We then ask them, okay, what would be, for, in your opinion, appropriate solutions to those issues? They then suggest those, and then we would provide input, right, and technical support wherever they need. But in that sense, yes, co-produced, co-created from the beginning all the way through. Those principles we pull all the way through into community-led monitoring evaluation too. So projects, monitoring evaluation, reporting, because for us that's essential to create ownership, but then also sustainability going forward.
Great. A couple of comments, one from Sarah, going through the funders' requirements and the reasons why they need them could also be beneficial to the learning of the community participants and their understanding of how to access funding and how that process works.
Okay, going through the funded requirement and the reason why they need them could also be beneficial to the learning. Yes, absolutely. Agree with you, Sarah. And I think, Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's very also transparent. We make it also very transparent to community members. There's multi-directional accountability, right? We are all accountable to so many actors in the work that we do. And so funders require X, Y, and Z from us in response to receiving the funding. And this is why they need it. And so understanding why it's needed is definitely a learning aspect for us.
Yeah.
Definitely, Sarah, thank you for that.
So I'm going to wrap up with the comment and the last question that's in the chat at the moment. So there's a request for next time. Maybe you can highlight the use of apps like Kobo Toolbox for gathering data for project monitoring evaluation in the next session. And somebody has helpfully shared the link to Kobo Toolbox. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Dina has asked, what are dissemination methods? Are they academic? Are they journals? What kind of methods are you looking at?
Very good. So dissemination for us means a couple of things. Yes, we do academic articles. We co-author many of those. We recently, Nancy, we did a co-authorship with a community group, submitted to an academic journal, and that was great fun. It was really wonderful to do that. We do blog writing, so those kinds of avenues. But then dissemination also means the community group would have the report of their project that they then disseminate with their stakeholders. And at a local level, that would be with local government, local captains, local leadership, future potential stakeholders that they would want to partner with. So it's sort of like an advocacy tool for them. And we've now done a lot.
Most especially in community members. So
yes,
they have to disseminate their data, the report to community members.
Exactly, among themselves too. Yeah, thank you, Nancy.
So I'm going to wrap us up there. Thank you so much, Elene and Nancy. That was really, really fascinating. It's so interesting to learn more about your work. And thank you everyone for attending. I'm going to say, as you know, Elene and Nancy are coming back on May 8th for a deeper dive into their processes and methodologies. We look forward to seeing you then. We also have another Arts Council or another place-based peer learning event on May 1st that is looking at, it's a connect and reflect, which just invites you to chat and ask questions about each other without any other ACE ears. It's just a kind of safe space. And the topic or the theme is a 360 view on how you understand your place and build that understanding. So I'm going to put the events link in the chat so you can register. And also, we'd love to hear your feedback on today. You'll be receiving an email with the follow-up survey, but I'm also going to place it in the chat just in case anyone is inspired to do it now. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.